All right. So we have Ryan Durr here today with Main Street Home Loans. A lot of you know Mike Jenkins. Ryan works with Mike, and super excited to have him here. If you guys haven't met him yet, he's a good person to know. Really loves working with new agents and helping you out in all sorts of things. And the topic we're talking about today is pre-approvals, which is like right there at the beginning. Right. So, Janet and I were just talking about doing an open house this weekend. Like she might meet a buyer tomorrow, right? And if she does, this is pertinent information. You're going to need this right away. So I'll just leave it up to you. I'll take it away, Ryan. I'll hand it over.
Sweet. Yeah, no, thanks for having me, guys. Happy Friday. This as Kirsten just said, this presentation is going to be about, the beginning, the pre-approval. And, my goal here is to be a good resource. And so that when you guys have that first conversation, you look prepared, you sound prepared, you're confident. I think confidence sells. Like when you meet a person and they really can trust in your knowledge, that's definitely been one of the best advice I've gotten, and to build a pipeline and have, consistent referrals coming in. So let me share my screen here, and it's gonna be it's about 10 slides. Stop me anytime if you have questions, and I'll also make sure to ask. I like it. I like it to be back and forth rather than, me just droning on to you guys. But can you see my screen, and can you see the PowerPoint?
Yep, looks great.
Cool, cool. So what's behind the letter? The letter is it's the first big ticket item. It's how you submit an offer. You need my letter. And in that letter, we're going over how am I able to print that for you, which really is a click of a button. And you want to make sure that with any lender, how did they click that button? How did they prepare that letter? Because any lender can give a letter, but it's still your job to make sure that that letter means they can close. And
Ryan,
so,
can I ask to have you talk about something? Because I often see agents thinking they have a pre-approval letter, and then as we're talking, things sound a little funky to me, and I say, "Can you send me that letter?" And when they send it to me, it's actually a pre-qualification letter, not a pre-approval, which is
yeah.
probably what would you mind talking about that a little bit?
Yeah, yeah. So pre-quals and pre-approvals are separate. Um, a pre-qualification is when if you were to call me and I was to ask you about your finances, your income, savings, credit. Those are the main three things that are going to determine if you approve. Um, you can verbally tell me you have an 800 credit score. You can verbally tell me you have 50K in the bank. You can verbally tell me you make 100K, but I can't give you a pre-approval. Um, I can give you a pre-qualification, which means yes, we talked about that numbers, but buyers don't always have or give, unfortunately, they don't always give the exact numbers. It's just the truth of the matter of it. So never submit an offer if a letter says a pre-qual. And in this presentation, we're going over questions on how you can ask them without asking, is your letter good to close? Um, because there's certain questions where you'll ask the lender as well that gives you like absolute guarantee and certainty that that letter is going to make it to closing because they did these steps X, Y, and Z without just, bluntly being like, are you going to close? Like, prove it to me. But a pre-approval letter, like my pre-approval letter explicitly says that I've pulled credit, I've checked bank statements, I've checked income, and that is the proper way to do it. If I don't have a credit pull, they can tell me they're 800, but they might be 700. You never know. Or if they tell me they make 100K a year and I didn't ask them for pay stubs or taxes or anything, that might come back differently. Same thing with assets. If you told me you have 50K in the bank, but I didn't check bank statements, then it's like that is the worst thing a lender can do is when you have a live contract, you're closing on the end of September, and I gave you a letter that says these things were checked, but then I didn't do my job up front and get those documents. And then I'm calling you and I'm like, hey, Kirsten, their bank account's actually 20K short, and now we're screwed. And you do not want that to happen. So that will be on the slide of, questions to ask that your lender did their full due diligence in their job. And again, back to the pre-approval versus pre-qual. Pre-approval, in a nutshell, it means you checked documents, you looked at stuff that was not just verbal, where pre-qual was like good faith, word of mouth. Yeah, you might approve. Now let's make those numbers come to life with documents. So these are the four topics. We'll get on to the next slide. So again, the letter is only as good as what's behind it. The weak pre-approval, that is where, someone maybe just stated information, estimated numbers. A really good pre-approval pretty much means that I can see the loan without the buyer there. Like the buyer should not be able to be there or on the phone with me because I have all their physical paperwork and numbers on my screen that, it doesn't matter what they say anymore. I have the proof because that ultimately is how a loan gets approved is what I like to tell buyers is I'm sending a nice package of documents to the underwriter. They are supposed to be able to understand everything financially that you have going on without ever talking to you. And that's pretty much in a nutshell how we know what to get for an approval is do we have all the documents for it? Any questions on this slide before the next one? And we'll be going into these topics separately as we keep going. So
Before
move.
you go on, I'll just give everybody a real life example that happened actually just last month. One of the agents in coaching actually talked to Mike. Mike told the agent, we can't get a pre-approval right now. Um, there was some issue, and I don't even remember what it was, but there was something where Mike said, no, we need X, Y, and Z, we need X first. Okay, whatever it was that I forget. Well, the buyers talked to somebody else, I won't name who it was, okay, another lender. That other lender issued a pre-approval without the thing that Mike needed. Buyer put the house under contract. They did a home inspection. It started getting closer to closing, and guess what? They still didn't have that thing that was missing, and they actually had to end the contract. They had to get out of the contract. And it was really horrible because here this buyer, fell in love with this home, paid for a home inspection. They were expecting to be able to move, but they didn't have that missing document. And the other lender needed it too and gave them a pre-approval anyway. So here this agent had to deliver this horrible news to this buyer. It kind of hurt that relationship with that, their relationship. He might not actually even be able to get a closing out of it. So it went south for both sides. That's how important this thing is, where, like everybody needs these documents, right? It's not like you guys are Main Street Home Loans isn't being stricter than somebody else. They're just doing the work up front. Important for you to know, that it's going to go through. We don't want to go through that whole process for nothing.
Right. And I like that Kirsten mentioned relationships. Or Alfonso, I see. Oh, what's up, Alfonso? I saw you raised your hand. What's up, man? How are you?
Doing well, doing well. I just had a question. So, in the event where you don't have the client doesn't have the funds, what happens? I know possibly it could push back settlement, or if the deal falls apart, can the selling side sue the other side? Like, what kind of protection does the seller have when the buyer doesn't, have what they need and the lender doesn't do their due diligence? Now, I'm a seller with a home that could have sold with someone else. How do they get compensated?
So with when it comes to being short on assets, one, there ideally is a strategy, before you even go under contract that if my computer screen says they need 20 grand, they are able to show me on paper, whether it's a bank statement, a 401k, a gift letter, down payment assistance that equals 20K. If I can't prove that on paper that they have a way of getting 20K, then then that shouldn't even become a live deal. Now, if they say they're gonna have the money and they give you a bank statement with 10K, and sometimes there's wiggle room. There's wiggle room. Us as professionals, have and in sales have to be able to work with a buyer, and at the end of the day, it's all about the relationship. There's ways around things. Not condoning cutting corners, but like if they have an 800 credit score and great income and they say they're going to have the 10K, but they don't show it on paper yet, you can vet them as long as they have a plan. And then now if push comes to shove and all of a sudden they don't have that money, the protection for the buyer and the seller, I would say, and Kirsten, correct me if you think you have anything to add to this, like I'm thinking the contingencies are how the buyers are protected in the contract. If we found this out before inspection, yeah, you could use inspection to bail. If I submit a loan to underwriting that only shows 10K on paper and I need 20, my underwriting is going to deny it. They will give me a denial. That is the financing contingency in the contract for a conditional approval. And if I give a denial before the end of that contingency, the buyer can get their earnest money deposit back. If you are after that deadline of the financial contingency, of loan commitment, then the seller can keep your deposit and the buyer's SOL. As far as suing and legal action, I'm not sure about that one. I would have to ask.
Yeah, and
Thank you.
we've seen ones also. I don't remember who it was, but where buyers did have it at one point and then spent it, right? So um, I actually had a buyer who bought a house that had fallen through because the prior buyer did that. Like they had the money, they got approved, and then spent some of it before closing, and then that transaction fell apart, and my buyer was able to kind of take over there. So it's some of that comes down to, I know Alfonso has a different situation, but I've seen ones where it's just a matter of making sure that your buyer is aware. Um, once you're pre-approved, like they're going to keep checking, right? Like you can't just like stop paying your bills and spend all your money before closing. Like we gotta like stay in this state of being pre-approved all the way till closing. So different from Alfonso's situation, but I ran into one personally that was like that.
Right, right. And it's that Alfonso, I would like to hear more about your situation. We could talk about that. It sounds like you got a live one. Um, but I would say preventing it from the start is the best way. It is. I actually get this question very often because, buyers don't know when they need the money or when they send the money. And what I always tell them is it's like, if you can't show the assets today, um, and it says you're going to need $20,000. You are wiring that $20,000 to title. If you're closing September 29th, you need to wire it September 28th. So when are you actually spending the money? If we went under contract today, some buyers think that they just give the money day one, but that's not true. You actually have until the day before to liquidate and send the money. Now, for a lender's purpose to get the loan cleared so that then you can even be at the step to send the money, I will have to show it on paper. But it does happen often where, for instance, I have a closing today where the client was receiving a $10,000 gift from their mother, and that was going to be shown in the form of a gift letter. The mom's writing on the letter, I'm giving my son $10,000. And I didn't get that until earlier this week. We've been under contract for a month. And that happens sometimes. But the buyer knew from day one that they would need that gift letter because again, he didn't have enough in his bank account. We need some other paper document that isn't just a verbal agreement. of will you have this money at closing? And then as long as all that the mom then wires the money to the title company, they're all good. So that's more on assets. And I will say, this presentation does have a lot, and we could go dive into deep underwriting all day, but at the end of the day, I definitely want to tailor this more to how can you guys make yourselves sound more confident in what you're saying, and ask the simple minimal questions that get your answers. Whether if the buyer's not giving you the full picture, and again you have a situation like Kirsten with Mike where the letter was not legit, because again I could just press a button and give a pre-approval letter even though credit was not pulled, and lenders sometimes do that. There are questions. That's probably the most important takeaways. If you can't get your answers from the buyer, then whatever lender you're working with, can you get your answers from the lender that makes you confident that you're going to close? Because again, you want to protect that relationship. You want to get paid, and relationships are how you get more referrals. Like I've gotten referrals just from working with a client and pre-approving them, not even closing them, just because the experience shown through the consultation. So I'm sure that's going to happen to you guys. Like you guys are going to have way more consultations than closings. It's just like the stat of it. So you give your best on every single one, so that they would, even if they don't buy a house, they could refer their friend. But so back to the presentation. This is, in a nutshell, the loan is credit. Credit is, how well do you pay stuff back? A loan is all about risk. All the rules of what goes into approving a loan is, can we prove on paper that the buyer can afford it? And can they consistently make payments, which is what we're going to learn more about in income on the next coming slides. But capacity, affording the monthly payment, it's big to be like, you might approve for 4,000 a month, but you only want to spend 3,000. So that's a big thing. What you approve for doesn't always equal what you want in a house. And then capital, do you have the money required to close? If it's 20K, do you have 20K? How are you going to get it? Collateral, does the property qualify for the loan? This is more to do with appraisal and inspection. Like I just had an appraisal come back where repairs were needed. And there's always the big distinction. Inspection is for the buyer only. It's not really the lender's business. But if you can see stuff in the inspection that might come up in an appraisal, it's definitely good to note, and let the lender know. Or if you can just see stuff obvious with the house at the showing, it's probably a good idea to be like, call Ryan up, call me, and be like, my clients really like this house, but there's like some peeling paint on the wall. Do you think that this is gonna be something that comes up? Because the sooner you bring things up and have solutions with the seller, everyone's on the same page, the whole transaction goes way smoother. Like again, my recent one, the repairs, or no, the appraisal came back and the fence needed to be painted on the front porch. So just could be small things, could be big things like a septic, that would be terrible. So always make sure the big appliances work. And then also value. But we'll go into more in that. There's another slide for that. Any questions on that slide before we start income? Cool. So this slide is, an example for income. It's more of an underwriting side. It's something that the lender should do, but if you want to ask a buyer, the number one takeaway from income is, I would say question wise is, do you have 2 years of work history? That's one of the first things a lender checks. No one's going to qualify. Well, there's some weird products out there, but for the most part, the main products that lenders use require a 2-year work history. Have you been on, let's say you work at you're like a barber. Have you been a barber for 2 years? Over 2 years? When I hear someone say they started 3 years ago, music to my ears. If you became a barber 6 months ago, I don't care if you're making 200 grand as a barber. If you don't have other job history before the 6 months, like you're like first time employed, we can't use that money. Because it's all, again, back to the consistency. Has this person made money consistently in the past so that they can prove they will consistently continue to make money and pay their mortgage? Question, Alfonso.
What about a situation where, say an employee, I mean, a client had consistent income for years, and then maybe something happened, then they kind of fell off for a few months, and then they got back on and they were consistent again. Does the break stop, or does it have to be consistently 2 years?
So that's a great question. Great question. So if you have gaps, that is fine, and every gap is its own scenario.
Okay.
Like it has to be explained. For instance, I had a client that has 10 years of work history in banking over the years. She took a 1 year break off of work because of family grief. And then she got a new job, um, and she had to wait 6 months because it was FHA to, even though she has 10 years of work history, there's a gap, and she wasn't on the job for 6 months. Now, it even gets sometimes pickier than that. If she was salary, she'd be fine, where she could just start the job salary. And even though she had a 1 year gap, you have to one, explain the gap with a letter of family grief. I write your whole history, and then you show me an offer letter and a pay stub for salary. And there's different tiers of income. Salary is the best because it doesn't matter how much you work, it doesn't matter how much you take off, you're getting paid the same. It's the most consistent. If you're an hourly worker, can I prove that 40 hours is like a salary? Do you work 40 hours every week and then the number matches where if I did the math, it's almost as good as a salary? Or are you working like 25 hours one week, 30 hours another week, 35 hours another week? That's inconsistency. We can't show that just out the gate when you started your job. You need 6 months of an average to at least show some form of pattern growing. Income can
Okay.
get a lot. There's so much that goes in income, but I would say I would say the best bet is to definitely, you know, you can ask how they're paid, whether they're self-employed, salary, or an hourly worker, and how long they've worked. That's what I would say is your takeaways as an agent. Again, how are you paid? How long have you worked there? Do you have any gaps? And then I wouldn't overwhelm the buyer with all the other stuff that I just said. I would then call your lender and be like, here's what they got going on. What do you think is going to come up? And then I might give you some more questions to ask, or, I'll talk to them, myself, because ultimately it should come from the lender when piecing apart income. Another quick
Hey,
income.
hey
Yes.
Ryan, I just had a follow-up to
Yes.
Alfonso's question. So, I know that you mentioned if it's like a FHA, would that still apply if it's like a conventional loan? If
Conven
there's a gap in the employment?
so great question. Conventional is a lot more lenient. Again, it will depend. It will depend on what kind of gap it was. It will also depend on, is your new job in the same field? Did you go from being a barber to a firefighter? Or if you were like always a firefighter and then took a gap and are still a firefighter, that's gonna work a lot better. If anything, I wouldn't worry so much about gaps if they have over 2 years of work being able to be documented. I had one client that had like 5 gaps, but all her jobs were the same, and I was able to get it through FHA where it was probably she had 24 months total of working over 5 years. Like that is gap, 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 gap. It's all chopped up. But same line of work. That's almost better than if you that she approved better than I've had someone approve where they have 2 years of work history, no gap, but they just switched to salary to an hourly job. It's those pay types that really get underwriting. Like again, if they have over 2 years of work and are able to document start and end dates that add up to 24 plus months, lenders should be able to figure out, in my opinion. Now, it's the pays. Again, going from salary to hourly, that's that's gonna be a tough one. If you're going from 1099 to W-2, that's another big one. I would throw that in your array of questions. Are you 1099 or W-2? Because, for instance, I had a nail salon owner. She makes $200,000 a year on her taxes. But then when you get to deductions, what lenders look at on a self-employed borrower is they look at line 31 on the Schedule C. It is the after deductions net. So her gross was 200 grand. And then after deductions, she got 40. She did not qualify for any home that she wanted at 40K. Versus if I have a salary buyer with a 200K W-2, we're going off of the 200K. Um, most things considered, but we'll move on to the next slide. Any other questions about income? We could talk about income all day long. It's probably one of the biggest parts behind the scenes that cause issues. And at the end, I'm going to show you, how you can at least make sure your lender has done a good check so that you trust your lender's proof of income from the buyer. But so next, having money versus being able to use it. I have 30K. Where did it come from? So again, we need to see it on paper. We ask in an FHA loan, you only need 1 month of bank statements sometimes. Conventional, you most of the time need 2 months. So there's a difference between having 200 grand in a bank account and showing over 2 months, like July and August, versus in July, if you had a $50,000 deposit and then in August, you're still showing the 200 grand. I would be like, I don't want to show my underwriter July because I don't want them to see the $50,000 deposit. Well, we should wait till September, where now our 2 months show 200K at the top, but there's no giant deposits in the transactions. Now, just because there's a large deposit, don't be scared or don't think it's the end all be all. It's not. If if there's a 50K deposit in the line, as long as we can prove where it came from, then it's fine. So that's the big takeaway. Do you have the what question I would regurgitate and you know if you are asking a client about their money, and sometimes that is a touchy question if you want to leave it to the lender. Most of the time I would say the safest way to go about it is if they don't want to talk about their money, it's between down payment and closing costs. It's smart to have 10% of the purchase price, at least. The overall down payment plus closing cost should be closer to around 8%. But sometimes, it can be like 10. So if it's $300,000, are you going to be able to come up with 30K? And then maybe you could ask, oh, okay, you have 30K. Did you have any large deposits? Yes, no. And then yes, I did. Where did they come from? Was it cash under a mattress that you put into an ATM and deposits on your debit card? That's a big no-no. Cash cannot be supported. But it's like, oh, it came from a family member. Cool, gift letter. It came from the sale of my last house. Cool. Let me get the document that showed you sold your last house. Or like you just sold your car. I need the invoice or the receipt. If there's a paper trail that can show where that deposit came from, you're good to go. And that whole conversation I just had, nowhere did I ask them, tell me how much money you have down to the penny. because people aren't always comfortable sharing that, but you can still ask the questions to make sure they should be covered. And that's a good takeaway. So, any questions on assets before we keep going? Cool. Okay, so this is what Kirsten was talking about, big no-nos. And this should all be said at the start. Um, when you want to be pre-approved the whole time from day one to the day you close. If you were to open a car loan, that's gonna hurt you. It's gonna hurt what's called your debt to income. It won't always hurt you. But when opening loans, credit cards, financing any loans, the reason that this can happen or hurt somebody is because of the way debt to income works. And the best way I think to explain is if can you guys see my calculator? So if I make $5,000 a month and I have zero debt, for the most part, FHA conventional, you can use half of that for all your debt. So if I make 5,000 a month, I can use 2,500 on a mortgage payment. That would be maxing out my loan approval. Again, I might not want to use 2,500, but that would be the max. Now, if you have a $500 car payment, it now looks like this. You cannot finance half of 5,000. You can finance half of the gross minus all your loan debts. So what that means is, again, if I make 5,000 a month, I qualify for 2,500 and I have no debt. I'm now under contract. I want to buy a car and I don't tell my lender. Now, if I take on a new car loan that's $500 a month, I'm no longer at $2,500 a month in debt. I'm at 3,000, which is over the 2,500 limit. That's what is going to blow up a loan is when it's gone over. Now, again, the reason it might not always hurt you is because again, if you make 5,000 a month and you get 2,500, whoops, if you get 2,500 as your budget, but the house that you're buying is only $2,000 a month, you still have $500 of wiggle room to put a car debt or credit card or student loans in there. So that is why it can affect it. And that's why if the takeaway question for you as an agent is to ask a lender is there wiggle room? Is there wiggle room in the debt to income? That's it. Those are the magic words. Is there wiggle room in the debt to income? Um, and then quitting or changing jobs, that goes with the gaps, the 2 year work history stuff. If you change jobs from salary to hourly, it's gonna be messy. It's not impossible. It's going to be messy. It's very case by case. Again, the spend funds needed for closing. If you need to have the amount to wire the day before. Missing a payment, this is a credit thing. If if you already own a home and I qualified you, and then let's say you were closing in October, and now you've missed September, that's going to show up. That's going to come up, and that could hurt your loan. Because the last thing that an underwriter wants to see to approve you for buying a house where your only job is to pay for it on time is to see that you just didn't pay for the other thing on time. That is the biggest takeaway from credit is do you pay stuff on time? Now, people can qualify with late payments on credit cards, cars, other loans. Mortgage lates are the worst. Um, I always do advise, even if you qualify with lates, please do not miss another one because that again, that could drop your score from 660 to like 640, and that 20-point change can take your loan from approving to not approving. And also, late payments really are the worst because when you get a late payment on a credit card, your credit drops a good bit, and it's not like you can just spend money to fix it. A late is like poison that like heals over time. I believe it takes up to 7 years for the damage of a late to like recoup back to break even. So there are very like large consequences for being late on a credit card. Again, move large sums unnecessarily. Can you document it? As long as there's a paper trail of where the money was moved from and how, it's fine. If the money was moved and you can't document it, then that's a no-no. But really, my job as the lender is really to figure that out. Like I had a client moving money from Bangladesh. We had to get a translator and look at the foreign wire transfers and do the conversion just to make sure that the money would move properly. So it's not supposed to be scary when you hear of this stuff happening. It's just can can you paper trail it is the big takeaway. Co-signing a loan, this is the same thing with all the other financing of loans. Are you taking on another debt that's gonna hurt your ratio for your gross? Any questions on that before we get to same price does not equal same approval? Cool. I'll be quick on this one. I think, yeah, there's a couple more slides. This is something I always tell buyers, if your pre-approval says 400K, the takeaway that I would ask a lender is, you're approved? So it's like, Ryan, you're approved for 400K. Is that including condos or HOAs? Because and because you could have two houses again here, property A, $400,000 list on Zillow. House B, $400,000 list on Zillow. The taxes on this one are $400 a month. This one's $650. Their monthly payments are going to be different. When we qualify a buyer, we do not qualify based on the purchase price. We qualify based on the the debt number. So it's like if you make 2,500 a month, you qualify for 2,500 a month. What that equates to in a purchase price is like, you know, a little bit under 300,000 with no condo or HOA. But if you're looking at condos, you might need to drop to like 200,000 because that condo might have like a $500 condo fee. So that's why the takeaway again, when you get a pre-approval letter from a lender, is this price their max? And is this based on including HOAs or condos, or would an HOA and condo lower the pre-approval price amount?
Ryan, I just want to add to that, like maybe, so one thing that I do personally that you guys might want to consider doing is if you have a client who's really interested in a house, I might even reach out to my lender even before they fall in love with it if I'm concerned about that. If I see a high HOA, I see a high condo fee, I'm probably reaching out to the lender first because I don't want them to fall in love with something they can't afford, right?
Yeah,
And so you might do that. You might say, "Hey, Ryan, we want to go see this house this weekend, but I'm noticing the condo fee is 600. It's listed at X price. What do you think?" Right? And then you might save yourself some time and your buyer some heartache.
absolutely. And that's like a big thing. Like in my process, usually goes you meet the buyer, I talk to the buyer. I'll come back and I'll be like, Kirsten, Ryan approves for $3,000 a month. They only want to be at 2,500 a month. Now I might be in a group chat with Kirsten and you guys send me five addresses on a Thursday. Sunday, you're gonna go see all five of those addresses. I I like to give you the numbers beforehand so that before Sunday, you see that these five houses are all from like 300 to 350, but their monthly payments are all over the place. So then that gives you a better idea. And then again, definitely, Kirsten's advice is great when you talk with a buyer and they like this condo, always call the lender and check if that condo fee is going to change their approval. So collateral matters. This is the buyer could have the perfect loan, the perfect credit, perfect savings, perfect income. If the appraised value does not come in right or come in at value, that can pose an issue. Not always, but it can. Same thing with the conditions. If they're buying a house and the septic's broken and no one wants to fix the septic, doesn't matter if you have the best loan ever. The appraisal's not gonna going to complete underwriting and go through. Condos, been a lot of changes recently. Condos require an entirely separate review. Like just like I have to pre-approve a buyer to make sure their finances will approve for a loan, us as lenders have to pre-approve condos as well. Like condos go through their own approval process. So there's always it's never a guarantee with a condo. That is why condos sometimes, like if I get a condo contract, I'm not planning my paycheck or counting my chickens until that thing closes, because you could have $1 million in the bank. Well, then just buy the condo in cash. But the the condo might not pass itself. Flood, this is something that, when you send me an address and I see that the house is by water, I'm gonna look up the flood because I've seen flood insurance where it's like $400 a month. Most of the time, the flood's probably not that expensive. But yeah, that would be the equivalent of taking on a new car loan. And the same with the other thing. If you approved for 2,500 a month and all the houses you looked at are 2,500 a month and you're happy, and then you go to another house at the same price, like on the river, and now you need flood insurance. That house is the same price as all the other houses you looked at. It's not 2,500 a month anymore. It's 2,500 plus flood insurance. So when you see water, just keep it in mind. Um, Property types, that is like PUDs, single house, detached, attached. The thing that I see this isn't really something I would worry about. It's something more the lender needs to pay attention to. But like, for instance, if a house has ground rent, investors really like ground rent because it helps with tax deductions. I can't remember the exact ruling, but if a house in the city is ground rent, that can sometimes help an investor. With a VA loan, a veteran, oftentimes they won't allow a house with ground rent. Even though if the ground rent's only $5 a month, it might have to be bought out by the seller or the buyer, however you want to negotiate it, that you're turning that house from ground rent to no longer ground rent. These are just things that can come up. Again, always just check with your lender. Okay, so this I would screenshot this page or it'll be in the recording. Definitely take a picture. These are very great questions to ask a lender if you're meeting them for the first time, if you've never worked with them before. Did you actually pull the credit? Do you have a hard pull? Have you reviewed income documentation? Do you have pay stubs? Are they 1099 or W-2? Are they self-employed? Do you have the papers? Have you received the borrower's assets? Do you have bank statements, a gift letter? How do they plan to pay it? Has automated underwriting been run? This is how this is how the lender now knows that you really know your stuff. Because what automated underwriting is if I have a computer screen with all the numbers of a loan, I click the automated underwriting button, it's gonna check all the numbers. I don't have to have documents, it's just gonna check what I typed in. Automated underwriting is going to give me a green light, a yellow light, or a red light. If it gives me a green light, that means I have to prove that all the numbers I just showed on paper are real. If it gave me a yellow light, that means even if I prove all these numbers on the screen with papers, it might not approve. And then if it's giving me a red light, it means these numbers aren't going to work at all. So if the lender has gotten a green light from their automated underwriting system, plus they have documents, that loan is closing 100%. If they have the documents to prove the automated underwriting is a green light, it's going to close unless something catastrophic happens mid-loan. But for the most part, that is the best signal. What loan program are they using? Are they VA, conventional, FHA? Are there gifts, grants, down payment assistance involved? The reason you want to ask this is because that can change the timeline. If you're using MMP, it might take longer than, 3 weeks. Or some grants, this one we get during the spring that is the best, but it's the worst, FHLB, it's $15,000 and everyone and their mom qualifies for it. That can make a closing go from 3 weeks to 60 days.
I had
So
two last year that were 52
yeah.
days, something like
Yeah,
that.
it's
Yep.
it's gnarly. So if a lender has grant on there, just ask them, have they accounted for their closing time? Outstanding concerns. Does this property and payment work? Did you go over these numbers with your buyer? If the lender might be lazy and just trying to get them under contract and tell them the numbers after, that's not good for your client. They should know the numbers of the house they're signing a contract for prior, and buyers don't always ask for the numbers. So the lender, it's their job, in the buyer's best interest so that they know what they're paying before they sign. If we were to ratify tonight, or do you still need other documents? Do you still need a credit pool, God forbid, or their pay stubs? And then, yep, so this is just the standard timeline. I'm gonna speed it up real quick to the end. Pre-approved, get a contract, inspect the property, bail because the inspection was terrible, or continue because the inspection was great, or negotiated, appraisal, and then that's the underwriting is happening during all of this, and then you end up closing. Um, yeah, good takeaways. Again, I could give you a pre-approval letter right now, and I've never even talked to you or looked at your stuff. There's nothing binding me from pressing the button, and that's most lenders. So that's why it's still your job to, ask the questions on this screen. Like, even though it says pre-approved, has the lender done their job? But that's about it. I know I went over a bit, but thank you. So thank you guys. You guys are always welcome. My cell phone's here on the screen. You can call me or text me anytime, just any questions before you go to a buyer. I want you to be prepared before you talk to somebody. Just because, the first impression is so important in sales. So, if you're ever unsure, text me, call me. I do open houses a lot. That's where I've built a lot of my business and like getting buyers from open houses. Um, so if you ever need a lender to stop by at one and hang out, I'm always happy to. I heard you guys are big on home buying seminars. If you want me to come in person or be on like a Zoom meeting like this, again, I'm happy to. Just text or call me anytime. But thanks, guys.
Any
Thanks,
final
Ryan.
questions for Ryan?
Ryan, we're going to talk more offline because I have a question for you about the whole gap in employment and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, I
call him.
got you, man.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
absolutely.
family wants to get together on some property, so I need to talk to you.
Uh,
Yeah, deal.
Nice. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, you guys, I mean, really, your lender is your partner. Like when I'm in the middle of a transaction, I work a lot with Mike, works with Ryan. And I'm texting Mike every day. You know what I mean? Like you don't just get the pre-approval letter and then never talk to that lender. We should be in communication so that the deal goes smoothly. Like
Yes.
early communication saves you so much trouble later, you know. And ha working with a great lender who's going to do a proper pre-approval and be there for you, actually answer the phone, right? That's going to make all the difference in the world in how your transaction goes. It's enormous. Anyway, thanks, Ryan, for sharing this today. I'll have the recording posted probably later today. It'll be on the coaching community if anybody wants to see it again. Um, and Ryan, if you have anything you want me to attach as an attachment to that, just email it on over and I can put it, with the recording if you want to do these slides or anything like that. That'd be great. And
Cool.
thanks again for joining us today. And hopefully I'll see you guys for the Momentum Mastermind in 10 minutes. So we can go grab a drink and I'll see you back on Zoom in 10 minutes if you're able to join in on that. All right. Thank you. Thanks,
Bye,
everybody.
everyone.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Bye.
See you later.